the 4% safe withdrawal rule is dead. Time for a new strategy. What's up everyone, my name is Joris, welcome back to my channel. The original 4% safe withdrawal rule allowed us to withdraw at least 4% of the value of our portfolio every year once we are retired. Unfortunately, this rule was set in stone when interest rates were high, and you could build up a portfolio of bonds that actually gave you a yearly return of that 4% without any risk. If you wanted the 2,000 monthly added extra income generated from the investment portfolio, or 24,000 euros a year, you would need to have saved up 600,000 euros. Not an impossible goal, and rather easily achieved goal with a few years of planning and hard work. But since interest rates in Europe are next to zero or even negative, and even in America they are fairly low, it is not viable to get a solid 4% yearly return from your bond portfolio anymore. Current studies suggest that you can only safely withdraw 0.5% of the worth of your bond portfolio. This is a big problem. You used to need to save up 25 times of your yearly expenses to withdraw that 4% safely, but if your withdrawal rate drops down to 0.5%, you will need to have 200 times your yearly expenses invested. If you wanted to have the same 24,000 euros a year, you would need 4,800,000 euros invested in bonds. That is an amount that not many of us will have saved up by then. This is exactly why a few years ago the rule changed from a full bond portfolio to a portfolio that is also partly invested in stocks. Compared to bonds, the return of stocks is a lot higher, so a larger return can be achieved in the same period with the same amount of money invested. But due to their volatility, a lot of risk has to be taken as well. The 4% rule was then translated to a portfolio of 50% in bonds and 50% in shares. And studies have shown that a yearly withdrawal rate of 4% of the invested capital at the start, and then the same amount every year but adjusted for inflation, will make sure that your portfolio survives the test of time. This is great news for retirees, but as said before, you will have to take more risk. Most of these studies are American though. As Europeans, we have to take a few things into consideration. First off, interest rates are not as high as they are in the USA. So the return on our bond part often still lacks the return required for a safe withdrawal rate. The solution here lies in investing in foreign bonds, which are riskier and often carry currency risk as well. In that case, bonds are almost getting as risky as stocks, so you might as well just add more stocks into your portfolio. Again, since there is no viable alternative. European bonds will be a lot safer, but they lack return, and the foreign bonds will have a better return, but they carry more risk. So as Europeans, we could raise the allocation of our stocks and bonds from 50-50 to 70-30 or even 80-20%. This would obviously raise the risk, but it will still be acceptable for a long-term withdrawal plan. Another big bonus we have is the very low inflation here in Europe. Inflation is the yearly raise in the costs of living. Your weekly shopping cart might now be worth 100 euros, but due to inflation, you are paying 102 euros for the same items 1 year from now. Inflation is targeted to be around 2% every year, but it hasn't been near that mark for years. And due to the monetary support in the last few years, inflation is not likely to pick back up to the golden 2% in the next few years. This lower inflation rate we can nowadays see make sure that there is an added buffer in our safe withdrawal rate. A portfolio of 70% stocks and 30% bonds will have an average return of 6 to 7% yearly after costs. If you then subtract inflation, that leaves it with a 4 to 5% in normal circumstances. But with low inflation like we have right now, your return is more likely to be 5 to 6% after costs and inflation. This means that due to low inflation, you are safe to take out 5% of your portfolio every year without hurting it over the long time. This means that we will only need 20 times our yearly expenses and then you can retire already. As long as inflation stays low, this can be a viable option. But of course, all really depends on what you have saved up. If you want to retire with exactly 25 times your yearly expenses, there is no real margin of safety. If you then start taking out the 4% of the portfolio yearly, and you start off with a few bad years in the stock market, or if inflation picks up unexpectedly, you won't be able to keep your portfolio afloat for the long term. And that is why it's wise to save up more of your portfolio while you still can. Maybe work just those few extra years than you originally planned, just to be sure that your portfolio never runs out of gas. If 4% of your portfolio is 30,000 euros and you only take out 25,000 euros a year, you have a rather big margin. But of course, to achieve this, you will have to save up 750,000 euros instead of 600,000 euros. It can definitely be worth it, in my opinion. I'd rather work just a little bit longer just for the peace of mind, instead of having to realize that I cannot take out any more money this year because it would endanger the survival of my portfolio in the long term. A major flaw I find with the 4% or 5% withdrawal rule is that it wants to keep the portfolio value alive as long as possible, for as much as possible. But if you don't have any family left, or you don't need to gift your money to someone else when the time comes, in that case it's a lot harder to predict how much you can actually take out of the portfolio. A 4% withdrawal rate will sustain the portfolio, but if you take out 10% every year, it might shrink too fast for your future expenses. And in the latter case, I'd suggest to take out money in cash for the expenses during the coming few years and maybe still get a 4% withdrawal as an extra. This way, your withdrawal is spread out over time and you're able to get more than you planned initially. I guess you will travel a lot more when you're 65 to 70 than when you're 85 or more. Still, all of this is theory, and not everyone has the luxury to keep working or save extra. Some people have reached the retirement age without knowing about FIRE and without knowing how to set up their pension funds. So let's now consider someone who's recently retired and has saved up 500,000 euros in cash over their working career. How should we allocate these funds? First of all, we should take a look at how much they are spending and what portion of that spending is covered with their state pension. If we then calculate that they need another 2,000 euros per month to cover all other expenses, we can then try to allocate the portfolio to that goal. But before we dive into the numbers, you should really hit the like button for the YouTube algorithm and turn it blue. 2,000 euros per month is 24,000 euros per year, or 4.8% of that 500,000 euros. It's slightly over what the portfolio can generate on average. So we could then ask the person to reduce some of their spending over the long term, so we can get away with that 4% withdrawal rate. This can be done by looking at high costs of living and spending habits. And since we're working with a rather limited savings, they don't really cover the expenses yearly, we need to be cautious and to be safe. And before any investing, I would then put aside at least 2 years of expenses on a savings account. And the rest of the money should be invested in a broad index fund and on a bond fund. The percentages should differentiate depending on the risk the retiree is willing to take. So now let's say that you are dividing the cash up as following. 2 years of expenses are put in cash, that's 48,000 euros or 9.6% cash. Another 20% cash will be invested in a bond fund, having the return of around 2% net, so basically inflation. And 70% of the portfolio will be invested in a global index fund, which has a historical net return of around 9.3% over the last 10 years after costs. But let's be conservative here and take 7.5%. If that return remains the same over the next 30 years, we can assume that this portfolio generates 28,250 euros per year, which is a little bit more than the needed 20,000 or 24,000 euros we saw earlier. Having a bit of a margin is really needed, since you will also take out money in bad years, when the stock market is down. So your portfolio will need to work slightly harder in the next years to catch up with the lost upward potential of the part that has been taken out. If the portfolio fails to generate enough money, if your portfolio only generates 18,000 euros per year, for example, you can still take out the required 20,000 or 24,000 euros, But you will have to note that every year your portfolio will shrink in size, and the return of the portfolio will also be lower and lower every year. So basically the portfolio will be eaten up slowly. If you leave the 500,000 euros in cash and you take out 24,000 euros every year, you're out of money in 21 years. If the return on investments is slightly less than what you take out every year, your portfolio will be worth 500,000 euros in year 1, for example 495,000 euros in year 2, 488,000 euros in year 3, and so on. Of course, the money will run out eventually, but it will go gradually and it will take longer to completely run out compared to just keeping it all cash. So long story short, it's always best to invest your retirement fund. And if you are really scared of the stock market, keep ample money in cash. If the stock market crashes, but you only have a few years in savings cash on the side, you can then just wait for the markets to pick up again. And in most cases, you'll be better off in the long term. Another way of reducing your risk, or at least mentally, is to start investing your lump sum of money in parts, using the dollar cost averaging method. Studies have shown that lump sum investing is in most cases better than dollar cost averaging, but for your peace of mind, it is your retirement fund after all, it can be advised to spread out the investments over time. Retirement is a changing game. You can't just save up X times your yearly expenses and then just quit your job. You should always consider changes in the future. Maybe you'll have to take a lot more risk than you anticipated, or maybe you will eventually run out of money. I think there's nothing worse than one day realizing that your retirement fund will run out and that you will really have to look at all your costs and reduce everything you can. That would be a very bad feeling. So please don't just say, well, I've saved up 25 times my yearly expenses, now I can retire, cheers. No. Think about it very well before you take the step to retirement, and always consider building a safety net, maybe by saving more than you initially planned. If you're 30 or if you're 40, it's very easy to just get a job back. But if you realize you're running out of money at the age of, let's say, 60 or 65, it will be very hard to get a job back and to get that money flowing again. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please leave a like for the YouTube algorithm and subscribe to the channel if you've not done that already. I thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.